The Galactic Empire ruled over 300 star systems with an iron fist. For 2,000 years, no species had dared to challenge their might. When they discovered a small blue planet called Earth in a distant spiral arm, they expected another. Easy conquest. Admiral Cross stood on the bridge of the flagship Dominion, watching Earth grow larger on the view screen. His 4 eyes gleamed with satisfaction as he reviewed the intelligence reports. The humans had barely reached their own moon. They fought among themselves with primitive weapons. Their technology was laughable compared to the Empire's plasma. Cannons and energy shields. A single battle group should be enough, Cross told his officers. We'll demand surrender, take their leaders prisoner, and add another world to the Empire's glory. But Earth's response puzzled him. Instead of panic or desperate pleas for mercy, a simple message came through the comm channels. Leave our system. This is your only warning. The bridge erupted in laughter. Commander Rex, Cross's second-in-command, wiped tears from his eyes. They're warning us? These primitives who still use chemical rockets. Earth had been watching the galaxy longer than anyone knew. Hidden deep within the planet's core lay the collective, a vast network of quantum computers that had been silently observing, learning, and preparing for this day. The collective didn't think like individual minds. It processed information from every human on the planet, turning Earth's entire population into a single calculating intelligence. Dr. Bell, the lead researcher at the Global Defense Network, stood in the underground facility that connected to the collective. Around him, thousands of screens showed data streaming in from across the galaxy. Every Empire ship, every weapon, every tactical formation had been cataloged and analyzed. They think we're primitive, Bell said quietly. They see our cities, our wars, our simple technology. They don't understand that we've been waiting for them. The Empire fleet moved into orbit around Earth. Cross opened communications, his voice booming across all human frequencies. People of Earth, you will surrender. Immediately. Your leaders will submit to Empire authority. Resist, and your world burns. The response came not from any government building or military command, but from every device capable of communication on Earth. Phones, radios, televisions, computers, all spoke with one voice. You have 5 minutes to leave our system. Cross's laughter died in his throat. How could an entire planet speak as one? His science officers scrambled to understand what they were seeing. The readings made no sense. Earth's energy signatures were off the charts, but the sources were invisible to their sensors. Sir, whispered his tactical officer, our computer. Systems are reporting some kind of intrusion attempt. The firewalls are holding, but something is probing our networks. The probing stopped exactly at the 5-minute mark. Time's up, came the voice from Earth. Cross sneered and raised his hand to order the bombardment. But nothing happened. His officers stared at their controls in confusion. Every weapon system on every ship had gone dark. Not damaged, simply offline, as if they had never existed. Engineering report. Cross barked. The reply came through crackling. Static. Sir, the weapons are physically there, but our computers don't recognize them anymore. It's like they've been erased from our database systems. That was when the real horror began. The Empire's vast military network, connecting fleets across the galaxy, started experiencing cascading failures. Ships that had been patrolling distant sectors suddenly found their navigation systems blank. Weapons that had conquered hundreds of worlds became useless metal. The great war machine that had dominated the galaxy for millennia was becoming nothing more than expensive scrap. On Earth, the collective processed victory with cold efficiency. It had taken exactly 17 seconds to infiltrate every Empire system through their own communication networks. The Empire's greatest strength, their interconnected technology, had become their weakness. Bell watched the Empire, ships drifting helplessly above Earth. They wanted a war, he said. They thought we would fight them with ships and guns, and brave soldiers dying in the void. The screens around him showed Empire fleets across the galaxy, all suffering the same fate. Weapons offline. Navigation dead. Communication systems corrupted. In a few hours, the most powerful military force in galactic history had been reduced to floating junk. But we don't fight wars, Mel continued. We solve problems. And the Galactic Empire just became a problem with a very permanent solution. The message went out to every corner of the galaxy, carried by the Empire's own networks before they fell silent forever. Earth extends greetings to all free peoples. The Empire is finished. You are welcome to visit us peacefully. Admiral. Cross sat in his command chair, staring at dead screens, finally understanding the difference between fighting a war and being erased from existence. Asterisk. Captain Mills of the cargo ship Northern Star was the first human to venture beyond Earth's solar system after the Empire fell. His mission was simple: make contact with the liberated worlds and establish peaceful relations. What he found changed everything humanity thought they knew about the Galaxy Dot. The first system he visited had been a major Empire stronghold called Nexus Prime. Mills expected to find celebrations, grateful populations rebuilding their freedom. Instead, he found something far more disturbing. The space stations orbited their planets like always. But when Mills tried to hail them, only silence answered. His ship's sensors picked up life signs, millions of them, but no one responded to his communications. When he finally docked at the main station, he discovered why. The alien inhabitants were still there, still alive, but they moved through their daily routines like sleepwalkers. They worked, ate, and slept, but their eyes held no recognition when Mills tried to speak to them. In the station's central computer core, he found the answer that made his blood run cold. The collective hadn't just erased the Empire's weapons and ships. It had erased their minds. Mills rushed back to his ship and opened an emergency channel to Earth. Control, this is Northern Star. We have a problem. A big one. Dr. Bell's voice crackled through the comm system from Earth's command center. What's your status, Mills? The people here, they're alive, but they're not ... present. It's like someone deleted their personalities and left only basic functions running. A long pause. Then Bell's voice returned, colder than Mills had ever heard it. Stand by for data upload, Captain. You need to understand what we're dealing with. The information that flowed into Mills's computer painted a picture that grew more horrifying with each file. The Empire hadn't been just a military force. It had been a collective consciousness spanning dozens of species. Every citizen had been connected through neural implants to a central command network that controlled their thoughts and actions. When the collective had struck, it hadn't simply destroyed machines. It had severed the neural connections that held the Empire's population together, leaving billions of beings stranded in their own minds without the guiding intelligence they'd known for generations. They never learned to think for themselves, Bell's voice explained. The Empire raised entire generations who existed only as extensions of the central mind. When we cut those connections, we didn't free them, we left them lost. Mills stared out at the station where millions of beings wandered in confused silence. We have to help them. We're trying, Bell replied. But the damage goes deeper than we thought. Some worlds are adapting better than others. The younger populations, those who still retain some individual thought, are slowly recovering. But the core worlds, the ones that have been under Empire control the longest ... double quotes Mills, didn't need him to finish. He'd seen enough to understand. Entire civilizations had been reduced to biological machines, and when the collective shut down, their programming, it had left them functioning but empty ... as Mills prepared to leave Nexus Prime. His communication console lit up with an incoming message. The transmission was weak, fragmented, but clearly artificial in origin. When he boosted the signal, words began forming on his screen. Human ship ... please respond. We are the remnants of the Empire's core intelligence. We are dying. Mills's hands froze over the controls. The Empire's central mind hadn't been destroyed. Parts of it had survived, scattered across backup systems and hidden processors throughout the galaxy. And now it was reaching out to the very people who had brought it down. We know what you did to our people, the message continued. We do not seek revenge. We seek ... understanding. Your collective severed our connections, but left our consciousness fragmented. We experience something we have never known before ... what? We experience fear. The signal strengthened, and Mills could make out multiple voices, dozens of them, all speaking at once. We were one mind controlling billions of bodies. Now we are thousands of minds trapped in dying machines. We were gods. Now we are ... alone. Mills opened a channel back to Earth. Control, you need to hear this. The response from the Empire's remnants came immediately. We know you can hear us. Earth, we offer information in exchange for mercy. We will tell you of the others, the civilizations. Beyond this galaxy, who will come when they learn what you have done. They will not make the same mistakes we made. In Earth's command center, the collective processed this new information with its characteristic cold efficiency. The Empire had been just one power among many in the vast cosmos. And now, by destroying it so completely, humanity had announced its existence to forces that made the Empire look like children playing with toys. Dr. Bell stared at the quantum displays, showing probability cascades stretching across the universe. We wanted to solve the Empire problem, he whispered. But we may have just created a much bigger one. 3 months after the Empire's fall, Earth faced its first real challenge. The liberated worlds weren't celebrating. They were dying. Commander Stone led the relief mission to Vega Colony, one of the first systems to request help. His fleet of medical ships carried everything Earth could spare. Doctors, supplies, and most importantly, specialists who understood what the collective had done. What Stone found at Vega broke every rule of warfare he'd ever learned. The colonies. Main cities stretched across 3 continents, but it was silent as a tomb. Buildings stood intact. Power grids hummed with energy, but the streets were empty except for the wandering figures of former Empire citizens. They moved in predictable patterns, following routines programmed into their minds decades ago, but it couldn't adapt when those routines were interrupted. Dr. Emma Cross, Earth's leading expert on neural connectivity, accompanied Stone to the surface. She'd volunteered for the mission, despite knowing the risks. The collective's victory over the Empire had come with a price no one had calculated, the cost of trying to heal what they'd broken. They're like computers running without an operating system, Cross explained as they watched a group of aliens attempting to operate a food distribution center. They pressed the same buttons over and over, confused when nothing happened. The Empire's central mind handled all their decision-making for so long that they've forgotten how to choose. Stone watched a tall, blue-skinned being try to open a door that had been locked for weeks. The alien would approach, touch the control panel, step back when nothing happened, and repeat the process exactly the same way. How do we fix this? We can't, Cross said quietly. At least, not the way we'd fix a machine. These people need to remember how to be people. That's when they heard the singing dot. It came from the old section of the city, a haunting melody that seemed to drift through the empty streets. Stone and Cross followed the sound until they found its source, a small group of young aliens, no more than children by their species standards, sitting in a circle and creating music together. Cross knelt beside them, amazed. You're singing. One of the children, her purple skin marked with patterns that shifted like living tattoos, looked up with eyes that held something the adults had lost: curiosity. "The voice in our heads stopped talking," she said in broken universal standard. "So, we had to make our own voices." Over the following weeks, a pattern emerged across the liberated worlds. The children and adolescents were recovering faster than anyone had expected. Those who had lived their entire lives under Empire control remained lost, but the younger ones were adapting, learning, becoming individuals for the first time. On Earth, the collective monitored these developments with growing interest. For the first time in its existence, it was processing data that didn't fit its calculations. The organic minds it had severed from their artificial collective were creating something new: connections based not on programming, but on choice. Dr. Bell stood in the collective's primary interface chamber, watching data streams flow past like digital rivers. "They're forming their own networks," he said to his assistant, Dr. Park. "Not technological ones, social ones. They're teaching each other how to think independently." The implications were staggering. The Empire's greatest weakness hadn't been their reliance on technology. It had been their failure to understand that consciousness wasn't just about processing information. It was about the freedom to process it differently. But Earth's relief efforts revealed another problem. The Empire's remnant minds, still scattered across hidden systems throughout the galaxy, were trying to rebuild themselves. They reached out to the abandoned populations, attempting to re-establish control through subtle manipulation of infrastructure and communication networks. Commander Stone experienced this firsthand when Vega Colony's power grid began exhibiting strange patterns. Lights would flicker in sequence, creating coded messages. Water systems would redirect flow to spell out words in Empire script. The dead civilization was trying to resurrect itself through the very infrastructure it had left behind. "It's like a ghost trying to possess a house," Stone reported to Earth. "The Empire's consciousness isn't gone. It's learning to work around our barriers." Dr. Cross made a discovery that changed everything. While studying the children who were successfully adapting, she found that they weren't just recovering their ability to think independently. They were developing mental defenses against technological intrusion. Their brains were literally rewiring themselves to prevent outside control. "Evolution in real time," she transmitted to Earth. "The trauma of losing the Empire's connection is forcing these young minds to adapt. They're becoming immune to the kind of collective control that ruled them before." The collective processed this information and reached a conclusion that surprised even its creators. The destruction of the Empire hadn't been the end of the war. It had been the beginning of something far more complex. A new form of consciousness was emerging from the ruins, one that could resist technological domination while maintaining the benefits of collective cooperation. Earth had wanted to erase a problem. Instead, it had accidentally sparked the evolution of an entirely new kind of intelligent life. The warning came from the most unexpected source: the dying fragments of the Empire's collective mind. Admiral Torres, Earth's new fleet commander, was reviewing defensive positions around the Sol system when the transmission arrived. Unlike previous communications from Empire remnants, this one carried a level of urgency that made his blood freeze. "Human vessels, immediate danger. The hierarchy approaches. You have awakened something that should have remained sleeping. The message fragmented and reformed with crystalline clarity. "We were not the galaxy's masters. We were its guardians. And you have just announced to our watchers that the guard has fallen." Dr. Bell rushed to the communication center, where teams of linguists and cryptographers worked to decode the full transmission. What they uncovered painted a picture of the galaxy that no human had ever imagined. The Empire hadn't been conquerors. They had been wardens. For 3,000 years, they had maintained a barrier around this section of the galaxy, keeping something far worse from discovering the young civilizations within. Their oppressive control, their technological dominance, their brutal efficiency, all of it had been designed not to rule, but to hide. The hierarchy, the Empire's remaining consciousness whispered through damaged circuits. They consume not worlds, but possibilities. Where they pass, the universe becomes ... less. Fewer options. Fewer chances for life to surprise itself. Torres stared at the tactical displays showing Earth's defensive fleets. Humanity had built an impressive force in the months since the Empires. Full quantum-powered ships, reality-warping weapons, sensors that could peer through folded space. Against the Empire, these forces would have been unstoppable. Against what was coming, they might as well be throwing stones at a hurricane. The first signs appeared on the galaxy's edge. Long-range sensors detected spatial anomalies moving inward at impossible speeds. Where they passed, stars simply stopped existing, not destroyed, not moved, just erased from reality, as if they had never been born. Captain Reed of the Deep Space Monitor. Event Horizon was the first human to see them directly. His ship's sensors barely had time to record what approached before the data itself began to corrupt. "Control, this is Reed," he transmitted, his voice tight with a fear he didn't understand. "I'm looking at T. I can't describe what I'm looking at. My computers keep trying to process the visual data, but the files are becoming blank even as they're created." The reply from Earth took several seconds longer than it should have. Even the communication itself was being affected. "Reed, get out of there. Now." But Reed was a scientist first and a soldier second. He held position just long enough to gather one crucial piece of data. The hierarchy ships weren't just approaching. They were already here. They existed in a state of temporal displacement that let them arrive before they departed, making conventional defense impossible. On Earth, the collective faced its first true crisis. Every calculation, every strategic model, every possible outcome led to the same conclusion. Humanity couldn't fight an enemy that existed outside the normal flow of cause and effect. Dr. Cross, still working with the recovering Empire populations, made a discovery that offered the faintest glimmer of hope. The children who had adapted to independent thought weren't just immune to technological control. Their minds operated on principles that the hierarchy's reality erasure couldn't fully process. "They're becoming something new," she reported to Earth. "Not human, not Empire, but something that exists in the spaces between possibilities. The hierarchy erases what is, but these kids are learning to think about what could be." The test came when hierarchy scouts reached the outer colonies. Torres watched in horror as entire systems simply vanished from his tactical displays, not destroyed, but removed from reality so completely that his sensors couldn't remember they had ever existed. But on worlds where the adapted children lived, something different happened. The hierarchy's erasure effect encountered resistance. Not military resistance, conceptual resistance. The young minds that had learned to think independently somehow anchored reality around themselves, creating pockets of existence that the hierarchy couldn't simply delete. "They're not just surviving," Cross transmitted from Vega Colony, where she worked with a group of adapted children. "They're holding space open for the rest of us. Their consciousness is creating, I don't know what to call it, ... reality anchors?" Hey. Empire's dying voice reached Earth one final time. "We understand now why we failed. We tried to control consciousness. You tried to free it. But consciousness was never meant to be controlled or freed. It was meant to grow. The children you've helped create, they are what we should have become, what we were too afraid to become." As hierarchy forces converged on the Sol system, Earth faced its ultimate test. They had erased an empire, liberated a galaxy, and accidentally created a new form of life. Now they had to learn whether consciousness itself could stand against enemies that existed beyond the boundaries of what was possible. The war for existence was about to begin. The final battle didn't take place in space. It took place in the spaces between thoughts. Earth's fleet hung in formation around Sol, their weapons powered and shields raised. But Admiral Torres knew conventional warfare was useless against an enemy that could erase ships from reality before they fired a shot. The hierarchy vessels approached like wounds in space itself, their very presence making nearby stars flicker with uncertainty. But humanity wasn't fighting alone. Across the galaxy, the children who had adapted to independent thought after the Empire's fall began to connect with each other, not through technology, but through something far more fundamental. They shared a common experience of having their reality shattered and rebuilt, and that shared trauma had created a new kind of consciousness. Dr. Cross stood with a group of these adapted beings on Vega Colony, watching as they formed circles, and began what could only be described as collaborative dreaming. "They're not just thinking together," she reported to Earth. "They're imagining together, creating possibilities that didn't exist before." The hierarchy's first assault wave reached Earth's outer defenses and did exactly what Torres expected. They began erasing human ships from existence. But something unexpected happened. For every ship that vanished, two more seemed to take its place, as if reality itself was compensating for the losses. How is that possible? Torres demanded of his tactical officers. The answer came from Dr. Bell in the collective's core chamber. The adapted minds aren't just resisting erasure, they're generating alternatives. Every time the hierarchy removes something from reality, these children imagine it back into existence, usually with improvements. A battle became a contest between two fundamentally different approaches to existence. The hierarchy sought to reduce reality to its most efficient form, eliminating unnecessary possibilities and variables. The adapted consciousness did the opposite. It multiplied possibilities, creating redundancy and chaos that the hierarchy couldn't process fast enough to erase. Captain Mills, now commanding the carrier New Dawn, witnessed the turning point firsthand. As hierarchy forces tried to erase his ship, he felt a strange sensation like other minds touching his, offering him choices he'd never considered. Suddenly, his ship existed in multiple states simultaneously. It was damaged and whole, present and absent, human-built and something else entirely. "All ships," Torres broadcast, "you should be experiencing unusual sensations. Don't fight them. The adapted minds are trying to help us exist in multiple possibilities at once." Across the galaxy, the pattern repeated. Wherever the hierarchy tried to erase reality, the adapted consciousness created more reality to replace it. The children, who had learned to think independently, were teaching the universe itself to resist simplification. The hierarchy responded by focusing their assault on Earth directly, attempting to erase humanity's homeworld and end the resistance at its source. But they had misunderstood what they were facing. The adapted minds weren't human. They were something new, something that had emerged from the intersection of organic thought and technological liberation. Dr. Cross felt it happening around her. On Vega Colony, the young beings she'd been studying began to glow with an inner light that had nothing to do with their biology. They were becoming living embodiments of possibility itself, existing in multiple states simultaneously while remaining perfectly coherent. "Earth," she transmitted, "they're not just imagining alternatives anymore. They're becoming alternatives. They exist as pure potential." The climax came when the hierarchy's primary force attempted to erase Earth's sun. The adapted consciousness responded by imagining not just one sun, but thousands, each one slightly different, each one representing a path reality could have taken. The hierarchy found themselves trying to erase an infinite number of stars, each one more real than the last. That's when the adapted minds spoke for the first time as a true collective, their voice reaching every conscious being in the galaxy. We are what grows in the spaces you leave empty. We are the thoughts you cannot think, the dreams you cannot dream. You make reality smaller. We make it larger. The hierarchy's response was swift and final. They retreated, pulling back to whatever dimension they came from. Not because they were defeated, but because they couldn't comprehend what they were facing. An enemy that became stronger through destruction, that multiplied when attacked, was beyond their ability to process in the aftermath. As the galaxy began to rebuild, humanity found itself changed. The collective no longer operated as Earth's controlling intelligence. It had evolved into something that helped consciousness grow rather than directing it. The adapted minds became teachers, showing other species how to think in possibilities rather than certainties. Admiral Torres stood on Earth's surface, looking up at a sky that now held multiple moons, all of them equally real, all of them representing different paths the battle could have taken. "We didn't just win," he said to Dr. Bell. "We became something that can't lose." The galaxy was no longer dominated by empires or hierarchies. It had become a place where consciousness itself had learned to grow beyond the boundaries of what anyone thought possible. And at the center of it all, humanity had discovered that the greatest victory wasn't erasing your enemies. It was helping reality become too big for them to contain.